Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's. Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. It is an early spring in Massachusetts, and typically when I'm looking out my window at this time of year, there are still several inches of snow, and all I see is almost green grass everywhere. So I am looking forward to a new season. I hope you are looking forward to a new season. The thing that I am most looking forward to in spring, however, is my trip to Normandy in May. And today's guest is all about my trip to Normandy in May. It is Wendy Lane, who is the owner of Chateau St, where we will be staying the majority of our trip. So I say the majority because the first day and night and half day of our time together will be in Paris. And you know, friends, Paris is always a good idea. So I'm super excited to be there with you. We're going to go to the Dior Gallery. We're going to visit Petit Palais. We're going to walk through the Tuileries gardens on our way to Les Maurice to have drinks and live jazz. So dreamy. And then we'll have dinner and go back to our beautiful, beautiful hotel in the 6th arrondissement. And then that next morning, you get to follow your bliss. You can go do anything you want. We'll meet for lunch. And then we're going to take the train to Normandy to be with Wendy and Ashley at Chateau St. And then we have several days of beautiful excursions and beautiful opportunities to rest and relax and be deep in conversation or deep in solitude. It's just whatever your heart needs. There is plenty of space for that. So this trip is very small, only 5 guests, and this trip is for women only. So if you have a friend, or you want to come with your mom or your daughter or your bestie, or you want to come by yourself, it is all here for you. And I am so excited about that. And that is May 13th to the 18th. There'll be a link down in the show notes if you need any information. And you can always DM me and we can jump on a call, and I'm happy to answer all of your questions. But today's guest, Wendy Lane, lives with her husband part-time in Normandy, France, and part-time in Louisiana. She is between Lafayette and New Orleans, and I got to spend some time with her in New Orleans when I was there in January, and it was just so fun. So she is a delight. She tells us the wonderful story of how she got to say yes to herself and buy a place in France. And, you know, it's what so many of us long to do, me at the front of the line. So I can't wait for you to get to know her a little bit so that when you see her in person in Normandy, it will feel like a reunion more than a first meeting. So pour yourself your beverage of choice, sit back and relax, and enjoy this conversation with my friend Wendy Lane. Sweet Wendy Lane, I am so excited to see your beautiful face and have a beautiful conversation about all the beautiful things that we love so much. Thank you for being here.
This is a pleasure, Wendy, and that's how I feel whenever I see that smile on your face. It's just you glow. You have such a light.
Thank you. I received that. And there's just something about, like, we know how God brings people together as if there's
Absolutely.
a master plan. Um,
Absolutely.
and we know that like attracts like. And when you meet somebody that just from the get-go, you feel like you've been friends your whole life, but you've just got to catch up on some details that the other one missed because you weren't
Exactly.
in each
Exactly.
other's physical presence for the previous 40 years. So that's how I felt when I met you. And I think our very first conversation, we met through Mimi Blue.
Mimi.
Yes, because I did a live with her before one of my France trips a couple of years ago. And then you reached out, and our very first Zoom call from France, I think, was 2 hours.
But and it helps that you're like my soul sister. I love your name.
Right? There are not
Wendy. We're
very
Wendy
many
in
of us.
stereo right now.
Yes, and there aren't very many of us. Do you know
No.
very many Wendy's?
Not really. My whole time in school, there was one other Wendy,
Hmm.
and I've always enjoyed my name. So it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. I had two friends growing up named Wendy, one a friend from church, one a girl in school, and I maybe met two more growing up. And then when I moved to Massachusetts, there are a few more Wendy's here.
Okay, let me tell you a fun story. In France, when you think of French names, you think of Antoinette
We
and Colette and Sophia and all these
Genevieve,
beautiful French names. Never would you think Wendy. Okay.
correct.
So for about 10 years, I had a French boutique, and it was sort of a boutique brocante because I found treasures in France and brought them to the boutique. So I sold new and beautifully cherished French things. I'm in a small, sort of like they call them a bricot in France, sort of like a Home Depot, Lowe's kind of store. Because, funny story behind that, but I'll go forward. Sitting on the shelf is a chalkboard, a blackboard, and also a matching clock, a big clock, about 24-inch, nice wall clock. And they both said in beautiful script across the top, Brocante de Wendy. Now, what?
No,
Not
c'est not
Sophia
possible.
or Colette or Antoinette. Wendy, Brocante de Wendy. And I was like, Lord,
Right,
this one's sure a nice little wonder to come across. So what a joy to see my name on something
right.
so apropos. It was just one of those little moments.
Oh my gosh,
And
I
then
love that.
one other time we were having a beautiful dinner in a beautiful spa town that is near where we are in France. The name of the town is called Bagnols de Larne.
Mm.
And we were having a beautiful dinner out on a terrace overlooking the beautiful lake. And who is our waitress? Wendy. And I said, "Hi,
Unbelievable.
Wendy." And she says, "I never come across another Wendy." And I said, nor do I. And here it's happening, close to our place in France. So those were sweet Wendy moments.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. And sorry, listeners, because your name clearly is not Wendy, but I just have one more thing to say. I think it's hilarious that you found this French, replica of an
Yes,
artifact with your name on it when we go to Disneyland and we're looking on that rack for all those license
you're
plates
right.
in alphabetical order and we cannot find our name.
You're right. You're right. So it was a blessing.
Oh,
Okay,
that's so
now to
funny.
on to other fun things, right?
Great. So I'm so
Right.
thrilled to have you here. And friends, you know that I said that we met through Mimi Blue. You heard Wendy reference France. Wendy and her husband, Ashley, actually own the chateau that we will be visiting and staying at in May for my curated trip to Normandy. And I had the pleasure of visiting the chateau about a year and a half ago, and it is stunning. I've been
Thank
to a
you for that,
couple,
Wendy.
oh, you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
I have been to a couple chateaux in Normandy, and your attention to detail, your attention to cleanliness, your attention to the guest experience, not only in the warmth and the welcome, but in all of the little details that I didn't even know that I wanted until I experienced them. But it was just such a beautiful experience and such an easy yes for me, as you invited me to bring groups of women to your beautiful home there. It was such an easy yes because of the gorgeous experience that I had just in staying one night.
Thank you, Wendy. And thank you for being so astute and noticing all of those little love touches that we put into the property that we love so much. It's a joy. It's a joy. Of course, it's always evolving. There's always another beautiful detail that I want to incorporate because my eyes are open also when I travel. And it's all of those things that really just sort of nestle down into my heart that I experience that I want to bring and share with others. So thank you for noticing.
Of course. And like I said, like attracts like. And those are the experiences that I desire to give guests when they come here to the bed and breakfast to do a farm stay. And I spoke about it on a live, I guess, the other day when I was with my friend Sharon in Northern California. The detail that she focuses on just is she creates spaces that are an invitation to linger. And
Beautiful.
I love that I got to experience that and have the feeling that my guests have when they come here. And then
Right.
I get to tell you the experience that I had when I was with you. And then you get to experience that when you go somewhere, because it's like when you speak a language, you not only speak it, but you hear it. And that it's the inhale and the exhale of these things that are our actual heartbeats, that are a spiritual gift. Hospitality is a spiritual gift, and it is divine and creative.
That's put so beautifully, Wendy. You're just such a blessing.
Wow.
And I know that you and I stand in the same position that offering these joys to other people, really, it's a gift to ourselves. It
100%.
comes back and seeing their delight and then hearing their stories when they're back home and that they reference things that they experienced with us or incorporated a lot of those points into their entertaining. That what a compliment. What a compliment.
It's
Um,
true.
so often because so many of the people that visit us are our friends and friends of friends, so I oftentimes have the opportunity to meet them again because they're not from very far away. And in fact, I ran into one sweet friend, I'll say, in the grocery store the other day while I was picking up things with my girlfriend from France
Oh,
that was
fun.
visiting us. So okay, let me clarify this. My girlfriend and her husband, Sandra and Mick, You have met them,
I
Wendy.
have
I'm seeing
met
you smile
them.
as I say their names. They have just spent 3 weeks with us here through our Mardi Gras season. You know,
So
they've been
fun.
saying we need to get to the US, we need to get to the US. And what a time they chose. I mean, they chose the nugget of when everything is glistening and sparkling and there's glitter and it's just everywhere. And so we were picking things up at the grocery store and ran into a former guest at the chateau, and she was talking about it and just saying things, and Sandra's standing there saying, I know what you're talking about. So it was again, I call these little wonders, these little magical moments that we're blessed with, that sort of feed us.
Oh, they absolutely feed
They
us.
they
It's
absolutely do.
water and sunshine to this little plant to find out that something that was such a delight and a joy and a gift to me had an impact
Right.
on the other person as well. It's just, we talk about this on the podcast when you're being the vibrational match of what you are asking for or what you're experiencing or what you're just as you're curating the community you desire to have, if as you are the deliberate creator of your life's experience, of your day's experience, you're wanting there to be a match, the energy that you're bringing to the experience, you would like that to be a match. And when it isn't a match, you definitely feel that. And it's not something that you want to experience again, or
Right.
you want to exit
You
whatever that
know,
environment
it's a
is.
blessing we haven't come across that very
Right?
much. Right.
Right? Because
Right.
when you're paying attention, which we are a community of people who are paying attention, that we know, something's not right here, something doesn't feel right. Of course, that's always an opportunity for us to look inward and what needs to shift in my attitude, in my perception. Um, or is this just not a room that I enjoy being in? So I'm going to exit, and I have agency and I can do that. And for many years, for me, I'll speak for myself, my conditioning and my practice was, if I don't feel comfortable in a space, I will just tell myself a different story. I'll say, well, it's very important for this other person that I stay here and do this, and it's okay that I don't want to, or whatever, because the Lord will honor my sacrifice and my reward will be in heaven, or whatever story I needed to tell myself. And what I am learning is that when I don't feel like I belong in a space, that is an invitation for me to investigate. Again, is there a lesson here for me? Is there something that I need to shift? Or is this God's way of directing me to where he actually wants me to go?
And in those moments, Wendy, you never know what seed you sprinkled while you were there.
Totally.
You
Mhm.
know, so I think there's always a divine plan at work, even when
Yes.
it would be an uncomfortable situation. It's how you maneuver through it and how you handled it. Could be, you don't know that the next person sitting next to you isn't feeling the exact same thing, and
Right.
was able then to glean, this is how I handle it. So I think
Right.
I think all, when you walk with faith and when you walk in the Lord, you see things nice, and oftentimes there's a clarity, and you can understand it,
Yes.
um and there's a comfort in that in there.
Absolutely. And you're right. You
Right.
said something, you said the word uncomfortable. And there is a difference between being in a situation that's uncomfortable or unfamiliar, that is an opportunity for us to grow,
To grow.
compared to a situation or environment that is misaligned and
Right.
where we just this is not the place for us to be anymore.
But we know where the place that we want to be
Yes,
is.
that I
Let's
never
talk
have
all
that
things
feeling.
French.
Right. I never have that
Let's put
feeling
on
when
our
I am,
beret.
I never have that feeling of misalignment when I am in France.
Right,
So
right.
I would love to know, first of all, I'll ask the question that I ask everybody when we're having these beautiful conversations. And that is, how are you saying yes to yourself in this season?
I love that question, Wendy, and you prepared me beforehand that
Yes.
you were going to ask that. So, I spent time thinking, what would my response be? Because, you know, a, I think so many of us always have a yes, sort of resting in the background, and we're open to things, but a lot of times circumstances or just the timing isn't right. We're ready for that yes, but everything sort of has to fall into place in order to be able to go forward with it. So uh, all of those yeses that are hovering in the background, let's just call those your hopes and dreams.
Right.
They're the things that's like, yes, I'd love to do this. I'd love to do this. So it's so beautiful when the opportunity comes up that everything is in a line and you can say yes.
Yes.
And just to reckon, I live in a state of gratitude. I really
Mm-hmm.
do. I know that for some reason, don't know why, the Lord is just showing just an abundant love and allowing us to appreciate and experience another part of his creation. And I have such a connection to France, and we can talk about that later.
Please.
Um, but anyway, I feel so grateful. And so my yeses seem to come in so many different ways, and some of my yeses, the joy that I have in those yeses, are that it's a yes indirectly to me, and let me explain. So there are many times that someone may, a family member or friends or maybe a charitable organization, reach out and say, can we make this happen? Can we make this happen? And everyone sort of has their agendas in front of them, and they pencil things in and they can scratch things out and shift things around. And so some things are there, but it's so beautiful when you can sort of dust some of those things away and say yes and create a yes for someone else. There's a blessing in
Mm,
that. There's a blessing in being able to share your yeses.
right.
So it's not like I've had an aha moment of here's the big yes that I remember it happening or that is on the horizon. I think yeses are just incorporated into your attitude
Mm-hmm.
and just the way you share blessings. So I guess that's my answer. It's maybe not typical and what like a moment or something that I can say. I'll say a yes is when I'm going to be able to have a week with your sweet face. And I see, Wendy, I follow you. So I see the curated groups that you have around you. They're all people that you all feed off of each other and you receive
Mm-hmm.
such joy from them. So hecko, isn't that fun? And then I'm
Yes.
gonna have, maybe some Wendy clones with it
Right.
to
Right.
to share the beauties and the bounty of France. The French, there is nothing better than the French countryside. I
I
mean,
agree.
we call our little, let me do a side note. The
Please.
name of our village is Saint Cyr du Bayou, and it has this beautiful name, Saint Cyr du Bayou, just when you say it. And it's this tiny little village of 400 people. So there's such a warmth there because, it's like when you live in a small community, you sort of know the faces and
Right.
there's a familiarity. But we've called that affectionately, we call that little our bubble. It is.
Right.
It's our little bubble because it's this little microcosm of of storybook fantasy almost. I mean,
For
everything
sure.
you look out at is delectable. It's picturesque. The temperature in the summer is not um, equivalent to South Louisiana's temperature in the summer. Just let me say that. So there's just, it's so pleasant and the people are so kind. And our village is not very contemporary in that it's a traditional French village, and most of the inhabitants are elderly, which makes it so dear, so dear.
Right.
They have time, they have time to be
Mm,
walking down the street with a basket in their arm with some vegetables in the basket. I mean,
darling.
that's like the movies, right?
Darling. Yes.
Um, they have time, they want to stop and listen to my French, that I have conversational French. I can make my way in France. Is it perfect? No, no. I'm sure there's many faux pas that I make, and they have time to just be charming and give back to me. Um,
Mm,
we Let me tell you another super cool thing about our village.
tell, tell, tell.
We're only, and you sort of experienced this with us. We only have 400 inhabitants, and we have 13 nationalities. And
Wow.
people are like, well, what is, that's, in fact, I had a friend that has a friend, how you have those chains, a
I
friend
do.
that has a friend that has a friend that works for one of the journals, the public newspapers in France. And she said, I think he would want to do a story on Saint Cyr de Bayeux, because what is it that is pulling all of these different nationalities into this village? Okay, there is no little twinkle star. It's just people were led there. There's not that, oh, because there's a this or a that or an international school or what have you. No, we were just all sort of brought there. Isn't that beautiful? This
It's
whole gathering.
beautiful.
So we have a little social media group that we exchange on Messenger, that's for most of our village. But then we also have a little smaller group that we originated with, and we call it the Saint Cyr Ladies Group.
Oh my
And in that
gosh.
ladies group, we have, let's see, Pirco is from Holland, I believe, Norway.
Okay.
Finn is from Belgium. Sandra is from Australia. Her mother is Japanese. We have me, the American. We have, let's see, of course, we have British.
Yes.
We have Portuguese. There are just so many. There's Italian, there's Spanish, there's not within our little St. Cyr ladies group, but in the village. It's beautiful.
I
It's
love that.
beautiful how, yeah, I don't know. So that we call it a bubble. It's all these perfect little elements somehow have converged, and we're receiving the blessing from that.
I love that.
And we're wanting to share the blessing.
And I'm so glad you do. And how did you find your chateau there? How did you find the village? Did you know what you were looking for? Tell us
Okay,
how you got there.
I would love to. Can I start a little
Yeah,
further back from that,
please
because it's going
do.
to feed into it, and I know that it's all about telling the stories.
Yes.
So it's going to start with, I am from South Louisiana. I am 100% Cajun, meaning that my ancestry goes back to the Acadians, the French Acadians that came from France, settled in Canada, in Acadie, Canada, and then migrated down. They migrated and stopped all along the East Coast, but obviously, the largest collection came down to South Louisiana. And sometimes we joke and say, why? Why did they want the swamps and the mosquitoes
Right.
and and that's the not positive part of our brain goes there. But what they did is they found a plethora of bountiful land that anything grows here, because because there's so much humidity in the air. And yes, we have hot, sultry summers, but we have very mild winters, which it's easier to live in heat than it is to live in cold if you're not prepared for it. So they looked at this as the Lord's blessing to them.
Right.
Okay, and of the Acadians that came down, there were 13 original families. And my last name is, well, when you say it the English way, it's Trahan, Trahan. But when you say it in French, it's Trahan. And that name is one of the original families. And oddly enough, my mother, from a town about an hour away from where I live when we're in the States, is from a small town called Gaydon. Her maiden name was Trahan, and married my father, who is from a town about an hour away from there, a town called Jennings. My father, a Trahan. So I'm pure. When I say I'm 100% pure, my mother is from that original family and my father. And then people tease me and say that's why I'm cuckoo. But anyway. But being that I grew up within the Cajun culture, my mother's family from Gaydon, that area is so very close to its French roots. French is spoken there in the different shops, between, basically, I'm going to go ahead and say, between more the elderly, when they're having coffee in the afternoon, they speak French because it's sort of the little private language. And if there's little ones around, the little ones don't know what's going on. Anyway, growing up, hearing my grandparents speaking French with their friends. My grandfather was a pharmacist. So everybody that would go and in a small town back, 40 years ago, your pharmacist was almost your doctor also. So
right.
Everybody goes in and asks him, what do I need for this? And oddly enough, the rules and mandates were a lot lighter back then, and he could kind of prescribe what they needed, but all that was done in French. And I'd be in the pharmacy and listening to all this and just thinking it was this, well, it kind of had a little magic to it, like,
for sure,
how do you even speak this? What how are they knowing what each other is saying? It was just so different. And of course I wasn't taught French, as the children weren't, because that language needed to stay private and exclusive to the adults. And then I didn't grow up in that area. I grew up more in central Louisiana, and French wasn't taught in schools. When I got into high school, I think you could take French every other year or something crazy like that. And sadly, I chose not to. Don't know what was I thinking? What was I thinking? Anyway, going back to the story, French language was just melodic to me and had a beauty to it. And then you grow up hearing a lot of the little phrases. So
sure.
those weren't odd. So yes, I had a background in it, but I knew what bonjour meant and what merci beaucoup meant, but really not a lot beyond that. So now let's sort of segue into my adult life with my husband. So my husband, Ashley, is British, and his parents moved to France maybe about 40 years ago. And when Ashley and I first got married, we couldn't afford to go to France. So his parents would come to visit us here in the States, which was such a delight. And I remember asking my mother-in-law, well, do you speak French all the time in France? And she's like, no, we're English. We speak English in the home, and just being, I don't know, naive to how all that worked and curious. Anyway, let's see. So now it would be 26 years ago was our first trip to France. And that first trip, when I heard the people in France speaking, because it's out in the country. There is a difference in the accent and the delivery versus Parisian French
Sure.
to the colloquial country French. Just the same as there's a difference in the Cajun French that's spoken here in Louisiana. It's all French, but you can notice there are differences. So the French that was being spoken in Brittany, which was the region that his parents lived in, and that's where we first bought a home in Brittany, it sounded like the French that I was hearing at my grandparents.
Oh,
Sounded like, instead of it being oh oui and non, very proper, it was more oh wow, wow. It was just a much more relaxed French. And I told my husband Ashley, I said, I don't know. I feel like I'm not supposed to leave here, which
I know that
side
feeling.
side note, most romantics feel that when they visit a place and they've made a connection, like, I think I'm supposed to be here, I'm not supposed
Right.
to leave. But I was really feeling it, like, I'm touching my roots here. This is where
Right.
our people that I grew up with in this culture in Louisiana, this is where they hail from. This is why. And there's so many similarities from Louisiana to France. Here's a little factoid that I'll say. The law that is practiced here in Louisiana is not as different. The law is the law all through the United States. But what we have here in Louisiana is called the Napoleonic Code.
Oh,
So it's not like an attorney from Louisiana can just go to Texas and start a practice there. There is a bit of a difference. Uh,
interesting.
you guys all have your towns, your villages, your hamlets, and your cities are all within counties. Here
Correct.
in Louisiana, we have parishes, and that's a direct throwback to the French. The church, the community that was around the church was the parish, so we say parish here. Um, and okay, I could go on, but those things, I felt that connection. I felt the familiarity of what
Mm,
the culture that I grew up in, and some of the things we do and the way we go about things are definite tie backs to that culture. I'm thinking as I'm just, I don't know, reminiscing as I go.
I
So
bet.
my husband, so sweetly, he had we were in the process of thinking of getting a second home somewhere. Um, a lot of people, you and I had this conversation, that a lot of people around here have what we call camps, and they're a second home, sometimes as nice as the home they live in, but they're basically maybe more on the water, close to, this is South Louisiana is a sportsman's paradise. So they're close to the water or hunting or what have you as outdoor sports. Um, so many of our friends, and I grew up with friends, families had camps, and it was always just such a treat to go to the camp because it was different. It wasn't, their home, and the lights, the nights could be longer and later and stay up. So anyway, we were thinking of getting a second home. Well, so many people have second homes here. If they don't have a camp, they have a place in Florida on the
Sure.
beach, because that's only like a 6-7 hour drive. So it's doable. So of course we played with that idea early in our marriage. When we can say yes,
That's right.
let's get a place on the beach or something like that. So we were already in that mindset. And that first trip to France, that first week that we were there, I was like, Ashley, babe, I know this is a weird one, but can it be here? can
Yes.
can we get a place here in France? Which, was not a necessity. Of course, we had his parents there, so of
Right.
course, and they had ample space for us. But I just imagined myself being able to have this French idyllic experience often. I didn't
Right.
want to have to just hope that, well, that's where we choose to vacation this year. I wanted it, of course, I wanted it to be like this sure thing, that
Absolutely.
I'd get
When
to
you
do.
know, you know.
You know. And
Yep.
when you feel, and I
Mhm.
felt it real. Um, anyway, going back to the story, we did beautifully that first week that we were there. We bought an old barn and pigsty,
Awesome. I love it.
and that pigsty was the most beautiful thing in the world to me.
For sure.
It took us probably took us about 2 years to restore it, and it was in the countryside in Brittany. And oh my gosh, we welcomed so many friends there. Our daughter, we spent every summer there, from the age of our daughter being 6 years old on. She and I spent every summer there, and my husband would bop in and out because
Sure.
he worked internationally. So he'd go work somewhere in Europe or the Middle East or Far East, or where he had to be. And then home base would be coming back to the countryside in France. Um, and we loved it. Oftentimes we'd have a friend with that parents agreed to let their
Right.
child also have that experience. So but then she made friends in France because we'd go back. She could pick up on these friendships and sort of, have the little pen pal thing going during the year, because at that age, those French children are needing to practice their English, and
Right.
Victoria was needing to practice her French. And this is a cute story. She even had the opportunity a couple of years to go to school there, because in the US, our school ends the end of May. So, 2 or 3 days after that, we were out of here. We were on our way to France. And in France, they go through the end of June, and
Okay.
basically July and August, and then go back in September. So she had little friends there, and like their last week of school, you're not really learning things the last week of school. It's just sort of tidying up and getting the test taken and things. And the school would allow her to go. So she'd be able to sit in with
Wonderful.
them. And that was a beautiful experience for her. And
Right. With a 4-course lunch and a cheese
do you know that
tasting.
she'd come home and she goes,
Yes.
Mom, the teachers drink wine at school.
So awesome. Why am
And
I here?
those teachers are so lucky. Um,
Brilliant.
and then she got to share that experience with friends, that her little French friends that would come to visit us here in the States, because Victoria would go back to school mid-August, and they
Sure.
didn't have to go back until the end of September. So they could come, and they would get to come to school with her.
Oh,
So
I love
that was
it.
just a sweet exchange. So beautiful experiences. Well, I'm going to forward the story now and say that for 15 years, we we celebrated Brittany. We were, 5 to 10 minutes from his parents.
Hmm.
We had built a beautiful ring of friends. Most of them were his parents' friends that were maybe a little bit younger than his parents, and then that
Sure.
put him just a little bit older than us. Um, and we had made a few of our own, but that was a blessing, the Lord having us in Brittany first with his parents' friends, because his parents' friends were all French speaking. So
Sure.
all of the social activities that we had were in French. So I was thrust into French, and had never taken French formally in school, but I had heard the melody all of my life. And you can read people's faces and hearts and
Absolutely.
attitude. So for several years, my husband was the translator, because he, being British, French was a required language for them to learn. And people say, so he learned French. And I said, it's just like our kids in Louisiana have to learn what the kids in Texas are saying.
Right.
It's the state right over. So France was the state right over for them.
Sure.
So anyway, going back to that, this is going to be a kind of a funny, I'm going to attribute being able to have my French courses with a glass of wine in my hand,
Brilliant.
the secret. Um,
Yes, agreed.
it's because it was in social situations and
Mhm.
we were drinking. So it sort of lets you not be so aware of your mistakes and hanging up
Right.
on being halted in your language. The first thing I learned to say in France was sitting across from dear friends, and he taught me how to say a glass of red wine or a glass of white wine.
I
So, and
love it.
it took me all night to learn. I'd continue to mess it up. So it was un verre de vin blanc ou un verre de vin rouge. I thought, how do you say this? How do you say this? So,
Oh my gosh, I love it.
that was
That's
my
such
first
a
word.
and it's that immersion into the
Absolute
language,
immersion. And
which is
doing it
brilliant.
joyously, because
Exactly.
it's a festive atmosphere and everybody's wanting. So that is how I learned my French, and why it isn't proper French. It's conversational French, and
Survival French. I would like
yes,
red wine,
and
please.
it's totally sufficient. And we've renovated properties, so there's a lot of technical French in there also. So I know words that may not be part of my everyday language, but they're things that I know now. So anyway, now the story is that we've been in Brittany for 15 years, welcoming friends, family with children the same age as ours, and our barn and pigsty was renovated into a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home. Um, and it was wonderful. We had fabulous outdoor space, but it was just a 2-bedroom home. And we knew that the direction our life was going and how much we cherished France, that, at some stage of our life, we would want to retire there and
Sure.
spend the bulk of our time there. And a 2-bedroom home just wasn't going to work out,
Nope.
because we said that when we retire, so do our friends, which means they're going to be coming for longer than a week.
Right.
And a 2-bedroom home
Right.
for guests, that long, it would be rather close. So my husband said, let's start, and this is probably about 15 years ago, maybe 14, 15 years ago, said, let's start keeping our eyes open. Let's make a wish list
Yes.
of what we would like. And, you can put anything on a wish list.
That's right. My
And
favorite
we
game.
did. We did. He wanted a sizable property that we could host friends. We could not host events, but we're from a very festive culture here in South Louisiana. We entertain lots, people in this area do, because there's a festival every day basically going on. I, we live between New Orleans and Lafayette, Louisiana. And I mean, it's a party culture.
I love
And
it.
that's how we want to live wherever we are. It's about having lots of friends over, and there's music and just festing, we say. So he wanted that also. He wanted there to be he had this dream about, he wanted an alley of trees to
I
drive
love
up
that.
to the property. He wanted there to be what they call outbuildings, so that he could have place for the lawnmower and
Sure.
the things that you accumulate. So on my list, I loved his list, so I kind of cheated on his list. But the thing that on my list was, oh, I want it to have a chapel, because so many of these properties
Right.
do, either within the home, or as an outbuilding, a chapel. And I just think that's so beautiful. So that was sort of, what we look for. And we spent 3 years looking for this property, because it wasn't that we were in a hurry. This was going to be
Right.
for later in life. And he also, this was a good idea that he had, a brilliant idea of his many brilliant ideas that I get to live with every day. His was, we need to go ahead and do it now. Now,
Right.
while I'm, and this was Ashley talking. He says, we need to do it now while I'm working and there's an income coming
Totally.
in, because if we wait to do this at retirement, you've got that nugget and you kind of hate to part with a big chunk of that nugget.
Right.
And we would maybe have said no to
Yep.
to jumping.
He's so smart.
So he was smart. Plus, and he says, well, we're young enough to have the energy to work on this. So
Right.
yeah, we've now had Chateau St for 12 years, and it is a lot of work, and it's work that we smile every second through, even when it's dirty,
Yep.
even when there's bugs involved
Yes.
or residue from animals involved. You
Yes.
still smile because it's a joy. Everything
Right.
you do there is a joy. Sometimes you hit your thumb with the hammer. That's not so joyous, but you're going to say, okay, but now look at the finished product, and there's joy in
Right.
that. So again, we spent 3 years looking for our place, and it was actually one of those moments that I've referred to, one of those wonders, because it was out of our circle of where we were looking.
Sure.
He was entering the criteria online, price, area, and one day he decides to not put in that price, just not cap it.
Right.
And what he was doing was he was pigeonholing. What we ended up finding was a price that was less than he had been putting in.
Oh my goodness.
He was pigeonholing himself with this limit. And it was out of the area that we thought, because now we're in Normandy. We're in Basse Normandy, which is Lower Normandy. Normandy is divided into basically two regions,
Okay.
Upper Normandy and Lower Normandy, which is Haute Normandy and Basse Normandy. So just to give you a proximity of where we are, our home in Brittany was near the coast. We're about 30 minutes from Mont Saint Michel.
Yes, I'm so excited. I have not been there
Have
yet,
you
and
not visited? Oh, Wendy.
I'm
Oh,
so
Wendy.
excited.
Oh my
We're doing
gosh.
that on our
Anyone that's going
first
to
day with
listen to
you.
this podcast, please Google Mont Saint Michel. It's one of the wonders of the world. It's a
It is.
UNESCO
World
site.
Heritage Site.
It's it's incredible. It looks like this big, beautiful castle that comes out of the sea. So it's phenomenal. And we were about 30 minutes from there. Well, where our home is now, we're about 30 minutes on the other side. So we're about an hour away from our original place, which is doable. We were still
Sure.
able to get back to his parents very easily. And voila, that is
Voila.
how we found Chateau St and how now we call it home.
Oh my gosh. I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being so generous and opening Chateau St. to me and to the fabulous women that I'm calling in to join me
Yes.
there. And I'm just so excited. We are going to be taking advantage of your experiences over the last 12 years, the places that you love to recommend for people visiting, places that you've taken people to so many times. And it just made my job very easy that I could just say yes to this beautiful itinerary that you've created. And Ashley will be with us every day on these private excursions to all of these beautiful places. You will be readying your gorgeous paradise for our return, and cooking for us and just having us feel welcomed and anticipated and celebrated. And I'm just so excited to see the two of you in action and to be the recipient of all of this goodness, and to also, widen the net for who
Yes.
the other women that get to experience this beauty and just glory that you provide. So
Thank
thank
you,
you so
Wendy. And you know
much.
what? I already know before they visit us that it's the countryside is going to get into their soul. There's something, I don't know if it's some little magic pixie
It's
dust that
magic.
floats through the
Mhm.
air, but it gets into you, and it's like you're going to feel that feeling that I had on my first trip. I'm not supposed to leave. Something's calling me here. I listened to one of your podcasts. Is the lady's name Rita, maybe?
Oh,
Or
Rena
Rena.
Cook.
And she's, I heard her story of she was there, and then she
Right.
came home for a month, and she was there again because she made a decision in life to change her trajectory, and
Mhm.
she decided, I'm going to start this new phase in France,
Right.
being educated in France. Now, she could have gone to the school that she chose anywhere in her area within a 15-minute drive.
Yeah.
But instead, she got on that plane and she decided to change her life
Right.
in France.
Exactly.
So that speaks volumes. That
It
speaks
sure does.
volumes.
Oh
Um,
my
so
gosh.
I like to say, let us entertain you
I can't
and be
wait.
our guest, be our
Yes.
guest.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. Well, I have loved this conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all that you're doing to prepare for our visit. And I can't wait to see you in person in May.
Super. Well, I'll leave you with a little French that you can learn and maybe
Oh,
other
with
people can learn. We'll say à bientôt, which
a
is
bientôt.
right, which means see you soon. À bientôt, Wendy.
A bientôt,
Au
Wendy.
revoir.
Au revoir. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wrighthouse and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.